Chapter 21 of Tante. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Dion Gines, Salt Lake City, Utah. Tante by Anne Douglas Sedgwick. Chapter 21. I'm afraid you think that I've made a dreadful mess of things, Gregory. I simply couldn't help myself, said Betty half an hour later. If only she hadn't gone on gazing at Karen in that aggressive way, I might have curbed my tongue, and if only, afterwards, Mrs. Forrester hadn't shown herself such an infatuated partisan. But I'm afraid she was right in saying that I was an unwise woman. Certainly, I haven't made things easier for you, unless you want a situation nette. It's there to your hand if you do want it, and in your place I should. It was a challenge she gave, you know, to you through me. After the other night there was no mistaking it. I should forbid Karen to go on Saturday. Gregory stood before her, still wearing his overcoat, for they had driven up simultaneously to the door below, his hands in his pockets, and eyes of deep cogitation fixed on his sister-in-law. He was inclined to think that she had made a dreadful mess of things, yet at the same time he was feeling a certain elation in the chaos thus created. "You advise me to declare war on Madame von Marwitz?" he inquired. "Come, the situation is hardly nette enough to warrant that. What? Ah, you do see it then!" Betty from the sofa where she sat erect, her hands in her muff, almost joyfully declared. "You do see it then, what she is after." He didn't intend to let Betty see what he saw, if that were now possible. "She's after Karen. Of course, but why not? It's a jealous and exacting affection, that is evident. But as long as Karen cares to satisfy it, I'm quite pleased that she should. I can't declare war on Madame von Marwitz, Betty, even if I wanted to, because if she is fond of Karen, Karen is 10 times fonder of her." "Expose her to Karen," Betty magnificently urged. "You can, I'm sure. You've been seeing things more and more clearly, just as I have. You've been seeing that Madame von Marwitz, as far as her character goes, is a fraud. Trip her up. Have things out. Gregory, I warn you, she's a dangerous woman, and Karen is a very simple one." "But that's just it, my dear Betty. If Karen is too simple to see, now, that she's dangerous, how shall I make her look so? It's I who'll look the jealous idiot, Mrs. Forrester thinks me." Gregory half mused to himself. "And besides, I really don't know that I should want to trip her up. I don't know that I should like to have Karen disillusioned. She's a fraud, if you like, and Karen, as I say, is 10 times fonder of her than she is of Karen. But she is fond of Karen, I do believe that, and she has been a fairy godmother to her, and they have been through all sorts of things together. No, their relationship is one that has its rights. I see it, and I intend to make Madame von Marwitz feel that I see it, so that my only plan is to go on being suave and acquiescent." "Well, you may have to sacrifice me, then. Karen is indignant with me, I warn you." "I'm a resourceful person, Betty. I shan't sacrifice you. And you must be patient with Karen." Betty, who had risen, stood for a moment looking at the Buddha. "Patient? I should think so. She is the one I'm sorriest for. Are you going to keep that ridiculous thing in here permanently, Gregory?" "It's symbolic, isn't it?" said Gregory. "It will stay here, I suppose, as long as Madame von Marwitz and Karen go on caring for each other. With all my griefs and suspicions, I hope that the Buddha is a fixture." He felt, after Betty had gone, that he had burned a good many of his boats in thus making her, to some extent, his confidante. He had confessed that he had griefs and suspicions, and that, in itself, was to involve still further his relation to his wife. But he had kept from Betty how grave were his grounds for suspicion. The bearing away of Karen to the ducal weekend wasn't really, in itself, so alarming an incident, but as a sequel to Madame von Marwitz's parting declaration of the other evening, her supremely insolent "I must see what I can do," it became sinister, and affected him like the sound of a second, more prolonged, more reverberating clash upon the gong. To submit was to show himself, in Madame von Marwitz's eyes, as contemptibly supine. To protest was to appear in Karen's as meanly petty. His reflections were interrupted by the ringing of the telephone, and when he went to it, Karen's voice told him that she was spending the evening with Tante, who was ill, and that she would not be back till 10. Something chill and authoritative in the tones affected him unpleasantly. Karen considered that she had a grievance, and perhaps suspected him of being its cause. After all, he thought, hanging up the receiver with some abruptness, there was such a thing as being too simple. One had, indeed, to be very patient with her. And one thing he promised himself, whatever came of it, he wasn't going to sacrifice Betty by one jot or tittle to his duel with Madame von Marwitz. It was past 10 when Karen returned, and his mood of latent hostility melted when he saw how tired she looked and how unhappy. She, too, had steeled herself in advance against something that she expected to find in him, and he was thankful to feel that she wouldn't find it. She was to find him suave and acquiescent. He would consent without a murmur to Madame von Marwitz's plan for the weekend. "Darling, I am so sorry that she's ill, your guardian," he said, taking her hat and coat from her as she sank wearily on the sofa. "How is she now?" She looked up at him in the rosy light of the electric lamps, and her face showed no temporizing recognitions or gratitudes. "Gregory," she said abruptly, "do you mind, does it displease you, if I go with Tante next Saturday to stay with some friends of hers?" "Mind? Why should I?" said Gregory, standing before her with his hands in his pockets. "I'd rather have you here, of course. I've been feeling a little deserted lately. But I want you to do anything that gives you pleasure." She studied him. "Betty thought it a wrong thing for me to do. She hurt Tante's feelings deeply this afternoon. She spoke as if she had some authority to come between you and me and between me and Tante. I am very much displeased with her," said Karen, with her strangely mature decision. The moment had come, decisively, not to sacrifice Betty. "Betty sees things more conventionally, and perhaps more wisely," he said, "than you or I, or Madame von Marwitz even, perhaps. She feels a sense of responsibility towards you, and towards me. Anything she said she meant kindly, I'm sure." Karen listened carefully, as though mastering herself. "Responsibility towards me? Why should she? I feel none towards her." "But, my dear child, that wouldn't be in your place." He could not control the ironic note. "You are a younger woman, and a much more inexperienced one. It's merely as if you'd married into a family where there was an older sister to look after you." Karen's eyes dwelt on him, and her face was cold, rocky. "Do you forget, as she does, that I have still with me a person who, for years, has looked after me, a person older still, and more experienced still, than the little Betty? I don't need any guidance from your sister, for I have my guardian to tell me, as she always has, what is best for me to do. It is impertinent of Betty to imagine that she has any right to interfere. And she was more than impertinent. I had not wished to tell you, but you must understand that Betty has been insolent." "Come, Karen, don't use such unsuitable words. Hasty, perhaps, not insolent. Betty herself has told me all about it." A steely penetration came to Karen's eyes. "She has told you? She has been here?" "Yes." "She complained of Tante to you?" "She thinks her wrong." "And you? You think her wrong?" Gregory paused and looked at the young girl on the sofa, his wife. There was that in her attitude, exhausted yet unappealing, in her face, weary yet implacable, which, while it made her seem pitiful to him, made her also almost a stranger. this armed hostility towards himself who loved her, this quickness of resentment, this cold assurance of right. He could understand and pity, but he too was tired and overwrought. What had he done to deserve such a look and such a tone from her except endure, with unexampled patience, the pressure upon his life, soft, unremitting, sinister, of something hateful to him and menacing to their happiness? What, above all, was his place in this deep but narrow young heart? It seemed filled with but one absorbing preoccupation, one passion of devotion. He turned from her and went to the mantelpiece, and shifting the vases upon it as he spoke, remembering with a bitter upper layer of consciousness how Madame von Marwitz's blighting gaze had rested upon these ornaments in her first visit. "I'm not going to discuss your guardian with you, Karen," he said. "I haven't said that I thought her wrong. I've consented that you should do as she wishes. You have no right to ask anything more of me. I certainly am not going to be forced by you into saying that I think Betty wrong. If you are not unfair to Betty, you are certainly most unfair to me, and it seems to me that it is your tendency to be fair to one person only. I'm in no danger of forgetting her control and guidance of your life, I assure you. If you were to let me forget it, she wouldn't. She is showing me now, after telling me the other night what she thought of my monde, how she controlled you. It's very natural of her, no doubt, and very natural of you to feel her right, and I submit, so that you have no ground of grievance against me." He turned to her again. "And now I think you had better go to bed. You look very tired. I've some work to get through, so I'll say good night to you, Karen dear." She rose with a curious automatic obedience, and coming to him, lifted her forehead, like a child, for his kiss. Her face showed perhaps a bleak wonder, but it showed no softness. She might be bewildered by this sudden change in their relation, but she was not weakened. She went away, softly closing the door behind her. In their room, Karen stood for a moment before undressing, and looked about her. Something had happened, and though she could not clearly see what it was, it seemed to have altered the aspect of everything, so that this pretty room, full of light and comfort, was strange to her. She felt an alien in it, and as she looked round it, she thought of how her little room at Les Solitudes, where, with such an untroubled heart, she had slept and waked for so many years. 3 large photographs of Tante hung on the walls, and their eyes met hers as if with an unfaltering love and comprehension. And on the dressing table was a photograph of Gregory, the new thing in her life, the thing that menaced the old. She went and took it up, and Gregory's face too was suddenly strange to her, cold, hard, sardonic. She wondered, gazing at it, that she had never seen before how cold and hard it was. Quickly undressing, she lay down and closed her eyes. A succession of images passed with processional steadiness before her mind. The carriage in the forest of Fontainebleau, and Tante in it looking at her. Tante in the hotel at Fontainebleau, her arm around the little waif, saying, "But it is a Norse child, her name and her hair and her eyes." Tante's dreadful face as she tottered back to Karen's arms from the sight at the lake edge. Tante that evening lying white and sombre on her pillows with eyelids pressed down as if on tears, saying, "Do they wish to take my child, too, from me?" Then came the other face, the new face, like a sword, thrusting among the sacred visions. Consciously she saw her husband's face now, as she had often, with a half wilful unconsciousness, seen it, looking at Tante. Ah, a fierce resentment flamed up in her at last with the unavoidable clearness of her vision, looking at Tante with a courteous blankness that cloaked hostility, with cold curiosity, with mastered irony, suspicion, dislike. He was, then, a man not generous, not large and wise of heart, a man without the loving humour that would have enabled him to see past the defects and flaws of greatness, nor with the heart and mind to recognize and love it when he saw it. He was petty, too, and narrow, and arrogantly sure of his own small measures. Her memories heaped themselves into the overwhelming realization. She was married to a man who was hostile to what, until he had come, had been the dearest thing in her life. She had taken to her heart something that killed its very pulse. How could she love a man who looked such things at Tante, who thought such things of Tante? How love him without disloyalty to the older tie? Already her forbearance, her hiding from him of her fear, had been disloyalty, a cowardly acquiescence in something that, from the first hint of it, she should openly have rebelled against. Slow flames of shame and anger burned her. How could she not hate him? But how could she not love him? He was part of her life, as unquestionably, as indissolubly as Tante. Then the visions crumbling, the flames falling, a chaos of mere feeling overwhelmed her. It was as though her blood were running backward, knotting itself in clots of darkness and agony. He had sent her away unlovingly, punishing her for her fidelity. Her love for Tante destroyed his love for her. He must have known her pain, yet he could speak like that to her, look like that. The tears rose to her eyes and rolled down her cheeks as she lay straightly in the bed, on her back, the clothes drawn to her throat, her hands clasped tightly on her breast. Hours had passed, and here she lay alone. Hours had passed, and she heard at last his careful step along the passage, and the shock of it tingled through her with a renewal of fear and irrepressible joy. He opened carefully the dressing-room door. She listened, stilling her breaths. He would come to her. They would speak together. He would not leave her when she was so unhappy. Even the thought of Tante's wrongs was effaced by the fear and yearning, and as the bedroom door opened and Gregory came in, her heart seemed to lift and dissolve in a throb of relief and blissfulness. But with her joy the thought of Tante hovered like a heavy darkness above her eyes, keeping them closed. She lay still, ashamed of so much gladness, yet knowing that if he took her in his arms, her arms could but close about him. The stillness deceived Gregory. In the dim light from the dressing-room he saw her, as he thought, sleeping placidly, her broad braids lying along the sheet. He looked at her for a moment. Then, not stooping to her, he turned away. End of chapter 21.